Hello and welcome to the Beef Edge, the Teagasc Beef podcast, for all your latest news, information and advice for Irish beef farmers. I'm Catherine Egan, and with progeny bred from the dairy herd accounting for 62% of the Irish beef kill in 2026, on this bonus episode of the Beef Edge, it features a recording of the Beef Pulse Forum on driving sustainable calf-to-beef systems, which is chaired by Breffni O'Brien, beef specialist with Agriland, from the recent Beef 2026 Open Day at Teagasc Grange. On the panel were Amie Coonan, calf-to-beef farmer from County Tipperary, Charles Smith, General Manager at Certified Irish Angus, Margaret Kelleher, Genetics Operations Manager at the ICBF, Dillon, Teagasc DairyBeef500 Programme Manager, and Gannon, Feed for Growth nutritionist.
So folks, you want to just start off maybe a little quick introduction on yourselves and tell us a little bit about yourselves, what you're doing.
Yeah, hello, so Amie Coonan. I'm farming part-time in Tipperary, working with Agritech then full-time. So rearing 40 calves, mainly Angus and Hereford, and then calving down around 25 suckler cows, mainly commercial, but started a few pedigree Angus. So yeah, that's pretty much it, a general synopsis.
Charles?
Charles Smith. I've worked for Certified Irish Angus for the last 29 years. I've played a role in the development of the brand over that period of time. I'm also a beef and dairy farmer in partnership with my brother across North Cavan and Meath area. That's it, yeah.
Yeah, Margaret?
So Margaret Kelleher, I work for the Irish Cattle Breeding Federation, geneticist. So I'm managing the team there of geneticists that create all the different indexes, manage the database. So we provide the replacement index, terminal index, CBV, DBI, which will be relevant to all here today. And just personally, just farming background as well, came from a dairy farm in Cork, and we're now farming in Tipperary.
Alan?
Yeah, Alan Dillon. I manage the dairy beef programme, so we've a team of advisors around the country that work with demo farms, run courses for new entrants to calf to beef, etc. And we have involvement in the Tipperary demo farm as well. Feed for Growth, Gannon works for one of our sponsors actually, and also I do a bit of calf to beef production and suckler production just to keep it real.
And Liam?
Yeah, Liam Gannon here. I work with Feed for Growth, who are owned by Denkivit, a major milk powder manufacturer in Holland. Work on the ground both with farmers, merchants and co-ops at farm level, looking at issues on farm in the spring in terms of calf rearing, and be a part of the AHI Animal Health Calf Technical Group, working group as well.
So Amie, maybe we'll start off with yourself. I suppose you're running a dairy calf to beef operation there in conjunction with a suckler operation. But we're here today. We'll be focusing mainly on your dairy calf to beef operation. Obviously, the theme for today is driving sustainable performance. Sustainability, obviously we have three pillars to sustainability: economical, social and obviously the environmental aspect of that as well. But can you tell us maybe a little bit about how you set up your farm at home, Amie, your dairy calf to beef operation, we'll say, and is it something that was always going on your farm, or maybe share your experience of getting, I suppose, set up initially?
Yeah, so we're probably at it. I would have always reared a few calves for the suckler side of things for replacement heifers, but for beef, it's probably the last 4 or 5 years. They come in, so after the cows kind of finish calving around Paddy's Day, I try and buy in the calves. So I'm trying to utilise the sheds that we have. So they're going in actually on the slatted sheds that the finishing cattle are gone off. So they're on a straw lieback and they're coming on to slats then where the calf feeder is. So from Paddy's Day on, buy in about 40 calves. They come in batches. I kind of collect 10 every Saturday. They train onto the feeder, and yeah, they're reared kind of to 12 to 14 weeks on the feeder. And then, yeah, that's...
Was the automatic feeder a new addition, or how do you find that's working?
Yeah, relatively new. I actually bought it second-hand off Dundee there 2 years ago, and it's a game changer. It's just the lifting, when you're feeding calves morning and evening, lifting buckets, and it's all you're lifting from the ground up to a height, so it just saves the back a bit. It saves a bit of time. As time goes on, there's probably a bit more work in the start, getting the calves trained in, but as time goes on, then you could probably go in your good clothes before you go to work, and you wouldn't get too dirty.
Liam, I might bring you in on that one there. Automation in farming, are you seeing a lot more of these automatic feeders now taking the place on dairy calf to beef operations?
definitely Breffni, but you know, it's a calf feeder is. I definitely calf feeder won't solve if you have a bad setup in the first place.
Yeah.
Calf feeder won't solve that for you. In fairness to Amie, she's working off farm and it's trying to simplify the whole labour issue on farm. But definitely, if your calf shed design is wrong and you don't look after in terms of drafts or in terms of bedding calves, well then a calf feeder is not going to solve those problems for you, like, you know.
Yeah, so it's not going to, I suppose, address management issues. You know, it's not.
Address management issues, like, you know. It's the main thing. Like feeders, they do a job. As Amie said, she bought a second hand. Like a 2-station feeder could be over 16,000, 4-station 24,000. It's a big investment. Yeah. You could buy something the likes of a milk shuttle or a taxi that'll heat and it'll drive itself for somewhere around 10,000, and at least you know you have your calves fed. Like sometimes with computerized feeders, you have to go in and check on them, and they don't all drink when they're supposed to drink, and they go on different alarms. So if you're not used to that, it is a big change. Whereas an investment, some other type of a more sophisticated milk cart, they're done and out the door you go, like, you know.
Alan, I suppose in the DairyBeef500 farms, is there a clear preference for feeding systems? Is there a preference for automation over manual feeding systems?
No clear direction really. If we take away 20 odd farmers, there's probably a third are on automatic feeders. There's another third are on the milk carts, and there's probably another third are still just drawing buckets with blue feeders, and they're all happy enough with what they're doing. It depends on the level they're at, the scale they're at. I mean, and you know, the time that's available. Sometimes if they're part-time or if they've large numbers, it's automatic feeders or milk carts and that. And so if they're small numbers or just time on their hands, it's just mix it up in the blue feeders. It's simple and it's cheap and effective. You know, it's, I suppose the one thing to remember about whatever you invest in, if you're only buying one batch of calves a year, it's a short period of time, and these things are in use for. You know, it's only 6 weeks, 7 weeks or thereabouts, and then you're gone, you know. So it depends what use you're able to make what you get, you know.
Yeah. Charles, I want to bring yourself in there now. Obviously, we've seen earlier this year, Certified Irish Angus have come out, you know, with its processing partners and kind of set out the plans for the year ahead as regards to the breed bonus. You know, the breed bonus has been a big help for dairy beef farmers, you know, on obviously predominantly Angus and Hereford cattle. You know, it has lifted them up there, you know, on price. Has been a good help. But I suppose there's going to be a little bit more asked of farmers now to achieve that breed bonus. Can you tell us maybe what's going to be expected of farmers?
Well, I suppose one of the things to start off by saying, Breffni, is that if there's one curse, in my opinion, in farming, and that's the inconsistency in things. And, you know, we're always dependent on the weather, and we've nothing that we can take absolutely for granted. And I suppose from our organisation's point of view, one of the things we wanted to do is build over all the years, build something that's reliable, and a bonus that's reliable is something people can depend on. And we wanted, you know, there's a lot of talk about the additional Angus cattle there is now, so we wanted to come out very strongly and declare that we were able to establish a consistent bonus that would be available long term, so that people could plan and invest in their production of Angus cattle on the basis of knowing that was there. So to do that, I suppose, and to be consistent and to be able to pass that on to the next stage in the supply chain, we have to be able to offer ultimately the end customer something extra. So looking at what those customers are interested in and what appeals to them, we identified like that things like in the environment is a massive concern for a lot of people, and certainly for that more discerning customer that we're expecting to go and pay a little bit more for an Angus piece of meat. So dealing with some of the environmental stuff in terms of AgNav, and AgNav delivering on the requirements from customers, and also a good tool for helping farmers to engage in that environmental piece on a staged basis, and to work towards maybe addressing some of the concerns that's there and delivering something a little bit more special back to the consumer. So we've built in a segment into the bonus that delivers an extra value for those who join AgNav and who participate and select the actions that they want to take and implement them. And also, the other piece that we've woven into it is an additional bonus for those who adopt genetic improvement, and in particular CBV value. And, you know, coming around there this morning, there's a massive benefit in the CBV value. Like the cattle, the growth rates, it was very obvious that the higher the CBV value was, the better the output of the cattle were. And that delivers across the full spectrum for the farmer as well. So not only are you getting that little bit more bonus, but you're also getting the added advantage of the performance in the animals. So they're the reasons that we've brought out that bonus or changed it, and we believe that they will stand us in good stead for the next couple of years.
Yeah, and just I suppose on that and the CBV, Margaret, we might bring yourself in there from the ICBF perspective. You know, like the CBV is a relatively new tool that's become available to dairy calf to beef farmers. I suppose, you know, to compare something in the dairy industry, we might maybe look at the EBI and how central it became in farmers, you know, looking at their cow performance. I suppose, can you draw, is the CBV going to be the EBI of the dairy beef industry? And I suppose, or where do you see it going now, and where has it came from?
Yeah, so even from going around today, just seeing CBV was in every village. So not just dairy beef, it was also in Suckler Village, it was in the main boards. It is only around the last 5 years. It came in the end of 2021. I mean, these things take time to bed in. EBI was much the same with other the beef indexes as well. I think what's different about the CBV is the fact it's not a breeding index. You know, it's a tool for identifying your more profitable animals for anyone that's beef finishing. It's very visual, so the traits in there make a lot of sense. So carcass weight is a high proportion of it, and we see loads of examples out there. Whether you're farming in the west of Ireland or, you know, have a finishing unit and you're a particular breed, the differences were stark going around the whole the tour today. So I just think that, yeah, it took time to maybe bed in a bit, but it's great to see it being incorporated into bonuses and, you know, different schemes. So yeah, look, I'd hope that people took a lot from today in terms of, you know, try to purchase your animals, ask those questions. Do you have a CBV for these animals? And, you know, you might choose one animal over the other, and that in its cycle itself will encourage the breeders of these animals. It's a choice at the end of the day, pick one bull over the other, and if, you know, if they have the same calving difficulty and gestation for the dairy person, but deliver more beef, then everyone's winning. So I do think it's taking off, is what I saw here today.
And let's maybe bring it back to Amie here at farmer level. You know, Amie, you're probably fairly familiar with the CBV by now, but I suppose, what benefits does it give you when you're maybe purchasing in your young calves? What benefit does CBV give you than with a visual assessment of the animal?
Yeah, I suppose it's very hard to judge a calf at 3 weeks of age as to whether that calf is going to be a good calf in 6 months' time or not. I'm very fortunate. The two dairy farmers that I'm buying off for the last 4 or 5 years, and at the start I was able to give them an AI list to use, so I was picking out bulls that were good carcass weight, good conformation, but still easy calve and short gestation. And I suppose it wasn't costing the dairy farmer anything extra to put in that better straw than put in an average straw. But for me, I suppose the effect that has on profitability is massive. It's producing them better CBV calves. The cow type is good on both farms, and it's costing me the same amount to feed a calf that's going to be 100 kilos or 140 kilos at weaning, and they're ensuring that for me without it costing anything extra for them or for me buying the calf, which is, I think, a win-win.
Yeah, and I suppose there is a piece there, Alan, that like there's this perception, I suppose, that producing maybe better quality beef calves is associated with longer gestation and more calving difficulty. Obviously, that's not the case. But I suppose, what are maybe DairyBeef500 farmers doing to show where they're sourcing their calves, the dairy farmers, you know, that they can actually get better beef merit bulls without sacrificing calving difficulty or gestation length?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, if we look at the DBI, and look at the information and that, I mean, almost any bull that's listed in the DBI is reasonable for gestation length and calving difficulty. You know, and it's to encourage dairy farmers to select the bulls from that are going to fit their system. I mean, if we're looking at advising dairy farmers or getting beef farmers to encourage dairy farmers to go a certain way, we always basically just pick a carcass level, and that's what we want. I would say, look, you pick whatever calving difficulty you want, whatever you're comfortable with, and gestation length. You want short or long gestation, depending on when you're bulling the cow. And look, calving difficulty, some people are happy with 7, some people are happy with 3. Depends what everyone wants. But carcass weight is where we don't really compromise. So we kind of say, look, if you're early maturing breeds, we're looking for people to pick bulls of 10 and 12 kilos and higher, or maybe more. And if it's continentals, we're looking at 24, 25 and higher. And look, if we say if you get to that, you're bringing carcass anyway, no matter what you do. Confirmation is going to be limited coming out of a dairy cow. That's the way you look at it. You're not expecting much more than an O or maybe an R minus or something, but we're not worried about that. It's just getting weight. That's all that matters.
Yeah, and just on that confirmation piece, you know, I seen a statistic here today. Actually, I think it's 60% or 62% of the beef kill is coming from the dairy herd. It's more than half, anyways, the percentage. But you know, obviously, when we're dealing with dairy beef animals, we're dealing with predominantly O-grade and carcasses. Charles, maybe, I don't know, it could be a bigger industry question, but maybe it's best directed to yourself, or maybe Alan as well, and Margaret, you can come in on this one if you want. You know, should we be maybe seeing some restructuring in the grid now where O becomes the new baseline, seeing as the majority of our animals are probably falling into that grid?
I couldn't speak on behalf of the industry now, but my own personal view on that is that no. I think that we still should aim for R-grade cattle. As Alan said, you know, I bring the beef cattle I bring through from our own dairy cows, which are predominantly Holstein cows, and using as good a bulls like what Amie is doing as we could choose, because we want to feed them along. And we still get, you know, maybe 10-15% of them falling into ours. Don't think that changing the parameters would make any difference, because it's all it's relative to an R price. So if you make it an O price as being the base, all you're really doing is changing the terminology. You're not really changing the metrics of it. You're going to then have, you know, a plus onto an R minus or an R equals, and then that's just going to be the same as it is. So I wouldn't think. I think that familiarity with what we have, you know, as farmers, we've adapted that, we're used to that. I see no real purpose in changing it myself.
Okay, that's an interesting one, Charles. Alan, do you think that there is more scope there to get more dairy beef animals falling into maybe the higher O's, or even, let's say, the O grades?
There is a much better selection of bulls, AI bulls available. If you look at the lists that are there now, in terms of, like, you know, if you go back, just pick the Angus breed, because Charles is sitting there, go back a few years ago, you know, bulls that were 8, 9, 10 kilos of carcass were hard to source. They're very easy to get now. You can go to 17, 18 easily. You some up to 25, which aren't too bad on the calving either, like, you know, and they're there. I mean, the bigger thing, if you want to encourage more higher grading, is to, if you're talking about this grid, is that 6 cents. 6 cents is based on a 360 kilo base price or whatever it is from years ago. You know, if that was maybe a percentage basis where the R's were being paid, and let's say, you know, if there's a 15 cent jump to an R or whatever, you know, whatever it could be, that would be the incentive. There isn't a huge incentive to jump up a grade at this stage. 6 cents on an €8 base price or €7 is a very small differential. It doesn't really matter that much.
Yeah, and obviously, Margaret, then ICBF have access to a lot of carcass data, performance data. You know, and if we look at the cow type that we're dealing with, I think the case is made that the live weight of the cows isn't changing, but I think the case is also there that the carcass weight is declining. So generally speaking, the cow carcasses are declining. So is the bulls having to do more work, and is there more being expected of the bull just to maintain carcass weights?
There is a bit of that. I suppose one technology we didn't mention here yet is the sex semen has really been a game changer. So, you know, just again, having a declining number of dairy males coming off the dairy herd has already, it's like a breed substitution. So we are seeing better CBV trends from the national population. A lot of that is because you've less of these dairy calves coming through. You have now dairy farmers trying out the Angus, the Hereford, but going further now. I think there's a bit more confidence there because AI companies are sourcing these animals that are easy calving. They have the short gestation, so that's why we see a lot of examples. There's a lovely pen of Belgian Blues out there. You know, there's plenty of people using Charleys and Limousines. So there's a lot of breed substitution going on. So I do think, yeah, with the fact that the dairy cow herself, you know, her conformation is not there. Her carcass weight, they were declining slightly. It's not huge, but the conformation is on the decline. Live weight, interesting enough, is actually increasing in our dairy cows, but it's not in the, you know, it's not from the beef quality aspects that we're looking at. So I do think, yeah, the beef bull has a lot of work to do, and it'd be very hard to convince a dairy farmer to go a different way with the cow at the end of the day.
Yeah, so I suppose the area that calf to beef farmers can focus on really is the bull selection within the realms of of calving difficulty and gestation. So that's kind of one area we can influence. The cow type will be a decision for the dairy farmer, the one who chooses to milk it. But so Liam, obviously the genetics is one piece of it, but the nutrition is another major aspect in getting dairy calf to beef systems right. But I suppose, you know, when you're bringing that calf on, you know, and getting to that critical stage of weaning the calf off milk, you know, when is too early, just right, maybe too late, age-wise or weight-wise, for weaning the calf off milk? And how much concentrates is too much, or can you feed a calf too much concentrates at that critical weaning stage?
Generally, we be kind of suggesting a target of around start the weaning process at about 85 kilos in weight. Basically, you'll be trying to double the birth weight at 8 weeks of age. So if the calf's coming in at 50 kilos, you should be on about at 8 weeks of age, somewhere around 85 kilos. There has been, particularly with computerized feeders and of the past, that basically weaning over a 2-week period, but with kind of issues with summer scour and things like that over the last number of years become a more prevalent. Tendency now has been to wean over maybe three weeks of age, just to kind of come down shorter. Basically, we're talking about coming down from 6 litres of milk or 750 grams of powder in 6 litres over a 3-week period, just to try and give calves a chance to be hitting on 2 kilos of concentrates when they finally come off milk. Generally, we start in the weaning process when they're consuming somewhere around a kilo of concentrate per day, and then gradually bringing the milk down. Either if you're on 3 litres morning and evening, be stepping down to 2 litres morning and evening, then going to 2 litres once a day and off. Otherwise, on the computerized feeders, it'll do all that for you, Breffni, like, you know. Yeah.
Amie, I suppose, is that what your weaning strategy looks like at home, or, you know, tell us what your strategy is when you're weaning your calves off and getting them onto the concentrate feed?
Yeah, so the feeder does it. So it's said over 2 weeks they'll move from 6 litres down to 2. I'm probably a big feeder. I like to have the calves eating an awful lot of meal before I wean them. So normally they're eating kind of 2 kilos before they even start weaning, and then they'll be up to probably 3 by the time they're weaned. I leave them in then for a month or even 6 weeks after weaning on ad lib meal. They'll eat again 3 or 4 kilos per head per day. I'll put them on dry silage and straw as they want it. I think, like, I don't see a massive benefit in letting young, freshly weaned calves out to grass. I don't think grass does a huge amount for that young calf. Their rumen is only just developed. They're not really fit to digest a whole much grass. So I think in terms of weight gain, like the average daily gain they do for that month or 6 weeks in the shed stands them massively for the rest of their life. I see Teagasc done a trial on it, and they were 20 kilos heavier in that period, and they maintained it the whole way through to being slaughtered. So between that and then developing the rumen properly, I think those two benefits of leaving them calves in a month or 6 weeks. And it's easier while I'm working full time. I just keep the creep feeders full and keep a bale of silage pushed into them. They're on slats on rubber. There's no work involved. When I go out in the evening, they're in the slatted shed. They're not in the neighbour's field. So it's a very easy system, I think, for managing them. And I think with this summer scour issue, which I see with the day job a lot, is becoming more and more of an issue. I think just making sure that they're eating enough meal and the rumen is developed before they go to grass is massively important.
Liam, we might bring you back in on that as well, and Alan maybe also. But summer scour, you know, it is kind of, you know, there's not a huge amount of definitive knowledge on it. You know, what are you seeing in the farms you're working with, you know, them calves, good calves being turned out to grass, and, you know, they just start fading away, and it's obviously a digestive upset, or what's causing it, or what are you seeing, or how are farmers rectifying it?
They're trying to put in some high fibre source at grass, either putting in feeders with straw in it or hay in with it, trying to strip graze them, not give them as much. Basically, on top of that as well, a lot of the swards tend to be too lush, and there's just not enough fibre getting into the diet. Others are basically bringing grass into the calf shed and trying to introduce grass to the calves before they actually go out for a few weeks to get their system used to it, is what other people are doing.
Yeah, Alan, is it an issue on the DairyBeef500 farms, or is it maybe not so much?
It had been in the past. It was a few years where we did have a few outbreaks of summer scour, and yeah, people having deaths on the farm and underperforming calves. We do find they don't really ever catch up. I suppose the only way around it is when if you do get a case of it, is to act fast and don't wait, because if it develops, the ruminants seem to be destroyed, and there's no amount of meal feeding or additives you can put into their stomach is going to resurrect that again, so they're going to be behind forever. Look, you'll still finish them at a reasonable weight, but they probably need to go to a third grazing season to make it up. The demo farm in Tipperary, Ballyvad, alright, had a very bad outbreak with it last year. And I suppose they're doing a bit like what Amie's saying there, and Liam, they're just saying keeping the calves in a bit longer, ad-libbing meal into them for a long period of time, and just it's about being vigilant. If it sets in, it generally happens around 4 weeks after they go to grass. That's generally where you see it. And
some interesting research, of course, there today on that role of ad-lib feeding calves post-weaning and the impact on carcass weights. Other interesting research, Alan, I mentioned to you there earlier on cutting out the meal for them early born, I think it was average February born calves, cutting it out for the summer. Are the farmers doing that in dairy beef farms or not so much? It depends on the number of calves they're buying. I suppose if you take the typical number of calves being bought on the farm, it's probably 40 or 50. So probably there's an age spread within that group. So you'll probably have, 6 weeks, 7 weeks maybe between the first ones and the last one comes in. If you do have that scenario, the last ones that came in will probably be the ones that are likely to get a knock in terms of summer scour or try to compete with the older ones. In that scenario, I'm saying just keep the meal in the whole way through with them. If you have bigger numbers, if you're buying 150, 200 calves, you'll probably still have the age range, but you can split them. You can probably go, let's say, 350s or something like that, and the early, maybe one or two groups can come off the meal and the late group can stay on it. But if you have any late ones in the group, your meal needs to stay in the diet. Come on, yeah. Amie, cut the meal out for the summer or not?
I think, as Alan said, it depends on when you're buying them in. I tend to leave them on it, but it's just I have a slight inconsistency of grass. It's not a fully reseeded farm, so they'll be going from old swords to new swords. So it just keeps something consistent in the diet, really.
Yeah. And I suppose we were talking a little bit already about grades and carcass weights. And obviously, the dairy beef Angus, the top end of the scale, the processors are happy. I see some industry representatives here today. They're quite happy with, them O+, good carcass weight animals. But then you do have, a certain cohort of them animals that are falling down into that, the O- and Ps and maybe, the out of spec, smaller 2, 30, 40, 50 carcass weight heifers. Charles, I suppose your initiative and the breed bonus, obviously now the change in qualification criteria, will hopefully put more emphasis on pushing to kind of reduce the percentages of these Anguses falling out of specification. Going into the years ahead, I suppose, do you see the Angus breed, that Angus cross Frisian animal, do you see it kind of changing? How do you see it looking in the next 10 years? Average grades, average carcass weights, average age of slaughter?
Yeah, I suppose I see that probably the average age of slaughter will come down and therefore the carcass weights will come down. But we're probably going to more valued customers at the end of the day across, not just Angus, but across all breeds, where, those pieces of meat are, first of all, more expensive. So therefore they need to probably, and also the demand is for smaller pieces of smaller cuts and smaller steaks. So between price point and people's desire to buy smaller pieces, I think that a reduction in weights won't really be that big a problem. But it does, obviously, for the industry cause an additional cost in processing lighter cattle is more expensive. I don't see that there's going to be a huge, in the next 3 to 5 years, reduction in carcass weights, or even in a bit longer than that, because I think that we have a very established dairy herd that, generally has a cow type that is going to deliver the potential with the right bulls to deliver that carcass that's going to be that 290 to 330 kilos for the steers, and then for the heifers probably from 270 to 300. So I think that they will be predominantly what we'll see. I have no fear that we're going to see a massive reduction. And as Margaret said, the work that's been done on carcass weight and improving the bulls that are there, I do think that we are going, even in the last 3 years, I see that there's a lot better bulls coming through, and even what Amie had said, it's a matter of people looking at that and adopting that. I think where we do find the problems with smaller cattle is maybe where we have crossbred cows, and we have people maybe who in the past weren't as focused on the bulls that they picked. But I think all those things can be managed within what we have.
And obviously, Margaret, to meet our climate targets, there is a big push on, and it's been talked about a lot in the industry, is reducing the age of slaughter. But, is the ICBF confident that we can maybe further reduce that average age of slaughter without sacrificing our carcass weights?
I mean, again, that's the whole point of these composite indexes, you could, if you just went after age of slaughter only, and then you'd run into that problem straight away, that your carcass weights, it's no good for profitability. So there's a balance. Look, I think the directions are going the right way. We're looking at all the genetic trends in terms of what's happening with the future beef calves on the ground. We are trending upwards. So look, it's one of the indexes where profit and the climate targets are hand in hand. They're going in the same direction. So, by having a shorter age of slaughter, you're having a better impact for the climate targets. Feed efficiency as well is a massive one in it as well. So, just thinking, outside your own farm gate, having more efficient animals, less product going into them, that's all, again, working towards profitability, but also working towards climate targets. So, look, breeding, it's cumulative, it's a slow burn, but it will contribute. It won't be the only other thing. I'm sure policy will probably come in to push this on even further.
Yeah. And Alan, I suppose on the whole DairyBeef500, I believe that the name of it was actually set up to generate, I'm open to correction here, no more than the home county. It was set up to generate a net margin of €500. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
So, so how far have we come? Have we met? We've obviously met and surpassed that, I believe. But can you talk a little bit about that and where net margins are? Obviously, last year was an exceptional year. But and where are we going forward with the sector delivering a margin for farmers?
Yeah, I suppose. Look, when we started off this probably 5 years ago or more, 500 was seen to be a reasonable target to achieve.
That's per hectare, sorry.
Net profit per hectare excluding payments. So it was seen to be a reasonable target that you wouldn't have to push the stocking rate too far in terms of into derogation, and I suppose they had to be conscious of not being seen to be pushed excessive stocking rates or big numbers or whatever. But I suppose we hit it most years, nearly every year along that 500. We're hovering between 5 and 750 for about 4 years, and then last year it just took off. I suppose, look, it was a function of beef price. That beef price went to 7 something a kilo, 7.60 a kilo, and it hovered in and around there for most of the year. And I suppose calves also were not bought that expensive last spring is the other thing that like our lads would have been caught buying calves probably a bit too expensive because they were buying them early in the year. In previous years, last year worked in their favour that they bought the calves before things took off, and probably bought them but not too much more expensive than the previous year. So there was a bit of a benefit there. So we hit an average of around €1,500 net per hectare last year across the group, and it varied then. If you saw when the first board's down there, the top third of the farmers came in about 2.3, and the bottom third in the group around 600. So I think the highest we had was about 2.7 a hectare net, which would be very exceptional, more than we thought it could get to. But beef price had a big role to play. Now it's dropped a bit this year. Calf prices are probably up about 200, 250 a hectare a head, which would probably knock, I don't know, 500, 600, 700 a hectare off the net profit straight away. And then beef price, I don't know where it's going to stay. It's going up at the minute. It dropped obviously, but if it was to rise back up towards the €7, I suppose they won't be too far back on the take home money from the cattle this year, given that a lot of the farmers tend to kill in either the springtime or the autumn time. There isn't actually a lot of them killed in the May to September period because of the nature of the system they're running, But I'd say, look, it should be reasonably okay this year again, I'd say, reasonably strong.
So it is obviously demonstrating that it can make a profit, but it's still the case, Liam, that there's a very high attrition rate in the number of farmers rearing calves. So basically, if you have X number of farmers rearing calves this year, you come back to that same cohort in 5 years' time, there might only be a percentage of them still at it. So are you seeing them high attrition rates in farmers you're dealing with, maybe rearing calves this year and deciding not to this year? Why are guys getting out? Are they getting out, or are farmers scaling up and getting more specialised in the calf rearing specifically, or what are you seeing generally speaking, Liam? I know it's a broad question.
It's definitely broad, Breffni, and I suppose, look, I'd be calling to farmers for year after year after year, and generally it's the customers I'm dealing with, they're tended to be in it for the long term, you know. Granted, all right, calf price this year made people consider, do I stay going or not, or maybe could I buy a rear calf cheaper, you know. But I think if you're in it, if you're in the system, you have to stay in it. Once you cut back in the numbers or decide to get out, it's very hard to come back at it again, you know. The only thing about buying calves, whether they're 450 or 510 euros this year, it's still small money compared to if you're buying yearlings or whatever like that way, Breffni. So all I can, yes, there definitely is a high attrition rate, but in general, the people I'm dealing with, you know, we're dealing from year after year after year, like, you know.
Yeah. Amie, what's paying the bills on your farm? Is it the dairy beef calves or is it the suckler herd, or is there a role for both?
I think there's a role for both. I must sit down and do the costs on the two. I'd have a very good idea of the dairy calf to beef costs, but it's just a bit trickier with the sucklers because you're bringing the cow into it and she'll graze a type of grass that the calves won't graze. So I think it's a nice... I think there's a big place for sucklers. I think they get a bad rep sometimes, but like once you've them calved, dehorned, tagged, there's not a huge amount of work with them for the rest of the summer. Whereas with the calves, the dairy calf to beef, you're kind of keeping an eye on them all the time. There's a little bit more risk there, but it's a nice system to run the two together.
And just another one then, Amie, like when you are buying in your calves, you know, how many calves do you know, like when do you say, okay, that's the number of calves I'm going to rear this year? You know, we had this conversation, I think, previously where we talked about, you know, you have that set amount of time allocated to feeding calves every day or twice a day, and for an extra couple of minutes you could feed, you know, an awful lot extra calves. But like, where do you arrive? Is it your shed space, or what's your limiting factor in the number of calves you rear? Time?
It's probably shed space and grass is probably the two. So the automatic feeder would probably take maybe 5 or 6 more. It's an old kind of style feeder, so that's probably comfortably till take 40. The room in the shed, like, you could pack in again an extra 5 or 6 into it, but it's at this stage then you start seeing problems. They get sick and things. And then grass, it's summer to graze them for the summer and house them next year, etc.
And I suppose, Liam, you know, like people who are in the business of rearing calves, often you find farmers that can be maybe really good at managing older cattle, but not so good at maybe managing young calves, or vice versa, really good at rearing calves, but not so good at managing maybe older cattle and grass. You know, how do you know if you're good at rearing calves? And Alan, I want to maybe get your opinion on this afterwards. You know, what are the KPIs of a good calf rearer? Is it weights? Is it, you know, is it successful weaning? Is it weight at first housing? What kind of things are you looking out for there?
Yeah, what makes a good calf rearer is a very good question, Breffni. And being honest, probably I would say it's fairly good norm to say that women are better at rearing calves than what men are. I think that's probably from where women's perspective of where they come from. I wouldn't be kind of saying that men are better at doing it. That's just not the case.
It's just more attention to detail, things like that, Liam, generally speaking.
It's the attention to detail more than that. Now, granted, there's fellas as well that are good at it, but just if you're looking from the ground, if there's women involved, definitely you're going to see better results in terms of hygiene, in terms of times of feeding, in terms of looking after sick animals. I don't think I'm upsetting too many male people.
I'm going to get the wife to wear the calves next year.
And Alan, look, KPIs on farmers that are in the business of rearing calves. You know, how do you know if you're doing a good job rearing calves?
You'll be watching the weights. The biggest problem with the calf stage is the health. This health thing is the one thing that's, and I don't know what it is, but there seems to be a massive increase in susceptibility of calves, from what I can see, to pneumonias. Now, and like, I mean, the amount of vaccinating we have to do now with calves when they come on farm, it's an essential part. I mean, buying your vaccines is nearly as essential as buying your milk replacer now. You know, because I suppose the calves are more expensive, and you know, you're under a lot more pressure in terms of making money now because of that. And I do see, for some reason, pneumonias seem to be much more prevalent. It's the one thing, you know, people often ask me, is there's a big problem with scours? I say, not really. Probably because the age your calves are coming in at 2. But pneumonias, all right, you're constantly seeing blows in calves and giving them, your injections, and you're calling vets out and that. But look, monitoring your weights along the way, and it's the first 12 months. Once you get them to 12 months, it's fairly clear sailing after that. That first winter can be a problem, and look, this summer scour thing is a new thing in the summertime that seems to set them back. But once you get to around even to say December of the year, from there on in, it's fairly clear sailing.
Breffni, I would say again, just the whole thing about whether whoever's rearing the calves is being consistent, and attention to detail, and that's it. That you need to measure. If you're using an automatic feeder, well, you have to calibrate and make sure it's calibrated, which a lot of people are doing don't even know how to calibrate the machines. They depend on some of them out the farm to come calibrated. Then the water pressure is wrong, and suddenly then you have problems breaking out on the farm. Likewise, if you're using bucket systems and that, it's about attention to detail and weighing the milk replace or weighing the water volume and make sure you're consistent on that. Likewise, you can pick up a likes of a weigh band. They're small money. They're only about €6 or €7. And if you haven't got the time with the scales or that to weigh your calves, you can put the band around them and it gives you a target weight for weaning. That there's no point in weaning calves unless they're hitting 85 kilos. But if you're doing it purely by visual, well, then you're not really measuring anything, Yeah.
And I suppose just even today at the Beef 2026 event, and it was great to see it highlighted at one of the main stands there earlier on, is that actually a lot of farmers are noticing that they're under pressure for time. No more than a lot of the people here today. I'd imagine a lot of beef farmers, are part-time farmers. They have off-farm jobs. There are plenty of full-time specialist beef farmers too. But the reality is that, a lot of farms are part-time. No more than yourself, Amie. What motivates you to keep going, to keep farming? You are working off farm, but is it money? Is it finance? And what could maybe be done to I suppose make life easier?
I think it's probably a disease. I think you probably either love farming or you don't. I class farming as my hobby. Probably I go out in the evenings. If I spend the day on the road driving or at the laptop, it's nice to go out in the morning before work and go out in the evening. You get a bit of fresh air. You see the cattle driving. I think I enjoy it. Really, is a big thing. Get more people involved. I think there's a new batch of young people coming on now that are really interested in agriculture. I think there's a slight turn in the tides, and there's a lot of young people both that grew up on farms and maybe didn't grow up on farms that are interested in agriculture now, and they're mad to learn. And it's probably about the likes of us giving them a chance to come on farm and get them up and running and get them going and give them a bit of help and guidance. So I think they're there. It's just to bring them along with us a bit.
But then I suppose Paul Crossan touched on it today in his stand as well, and it's about making farms safe places for people to be, to work, and making them attractive places will be very important to ensuring that there is more, broadly speaking, younger people getting involved and working in these spaces.
I think that's really important. Like, I have nieces and nephews, and they love coming out especially with the dairy calves, because they're quiet. They can be in around them, but it's just about letting them know that they can't go up on the tractor on their own, or that the tanks, everything is clear. That even the likes of the 4-grain fork, things like that, are left up out of the way. Like, it's only when the likes of them at that age come around the place you actually see how much dangers there is, because when you're at it every day yourself, you don't see it. But it's when little hands and helpers come, you just notice them things, all right?
Yeah, and obviously, generally speaking, but as with all livestock, safety has to be first. But broadly speaking, the dairy beef animals are traditionally kind of more docile. Charles, the Angus breed is obviously known to be more docile, we say, than maybe some of the continental breeds. Looking at the AIMS database this year, Charles, I think for 2025 figures shows that Angus is now the largest population animal births in the country. I think last year was the first year that Angus took the place over Friesian. Do you see that remaining the case? And I suppose, what work do you have to do as Certified Irish Angus Producer Group to retain that space going forward and keep the Angus as a popular breed?
I don't suppose we see it as a position we have to maintain. It has come about as a result of, maybe to some small extent, what we do, but mainly because of the work ICBF has done, and also the suitability of it to dairy cows, and something Margaret mentioned earlier, sex semen. the fact that the dairy farmer can use sex semen and produce his females from less cows. So the growth in Angus has been attributed mainly to those reasons. I don't see it as a position we need to maintain within Angus that it is the number one births in the country. But what I do see in it is two things. First of all, a great opportunity, because if we can sell those animals and market them at a little bit more value and deliver that value right down through the supply chain, we can certainly boost farm incomes, and we can take in, I think even in some of the indexes, the value of the bonuses are built into them. And then I see it also, I suppose, as a little bit of a threat in that if we have too many Angus cattle, it's going to cause definitely at some stage a glut of Angus cattle in the market. And therefore it's essential that we look at ways of carving out Angus differentiation between certain Angus cattle, that some of them are more maybe environmentally friendly to produce than others, and therefore looking at things like the way they're farmed and the indexes, again, the carcass weights that we have output more from certain animals.
And I suppose just listening from my own personal experience, listening to some of the older, more experienced industry personnel that are here today, they would have said if they were here 20 years ago and someone told them that Angus would be the most popular breed in the country, they would have been quite surprised. But Margaret, you know, if we're here in 20 years' time, are we going to see maybe new breeds coming in that are ticking the box for specific niches? We hear some talk about eating quality. I know Angus ticks the box there on the marbling, but there are other breeds there too. And are we going to see them moving in and taking more prominence in the industry, do you think, Margaret?
Well, there's a massive shift in the demographic of what's coming out of the dairy herd in terms of the beef animals. And I think the most important thing, no matter what the breed is, it is the most profitable animal going forward. So, you know, people will adapt in the industry. So, you know, I mean, there's different bonuses, different schemes. So, you know, Anguses may keep going, or dairy farmers might get braver and they might bring in those other breeds. But I always say it's not about, to us really, it's not about the breeds. As long as you're breeding the most profitable, most efficient animals, less feed intake, more output in the carcass quality traits, that's what's the most important thing to everyone in this field here today. So, that, you know, it's not a breed decision in my view.
Alan, do you see any maybe new breeds or any other breeds coming in? I see there some processors are bringing in, you know, specialised breed-specific programs there, things like that. Do you see them becoming more popular, or what's your thoughts?
I don't know. I suppose, look, if we take the demonstration farms, up to about 2 years ago, it was the Friesian was the breed of choice. It was just a cheap animal that did what it said in the tin. You got your 300 kilo carcass and it was a P or an O, and that was it. But I suppose they're getting scarcer and they're getting more expensive. You know, there wasn't an awful differential between Friesians and you know, beef breeds this spring compared to other years. And a lot of farmers are moving more towards the beef breeds, I think, for just their dare, and I suppose they're not. There isn't a huge amount of different extra cash involved versus buying the Friesian. Some people are trying the likes of the Wagyus and Longhorns and other types of things, you know. And I don't know how they'll work out yet. In terms, depends what bonuses are available on those and what payment structure is there. I know some of them are maybe on flat pricing models, and some people are happy with that, and that's fine. But I think, look, you're probably still going to be looking at whatever is the most commonly available animal on a dairy farm when they're buying straight off.
And I think it's time now for us to start wrapping up. But I suppose, Liam, you know, final comments, if you could give anybody, you know, one bit of advice that you've seen to be most effective, broadly speaking, for people in the business of dairy calf to beef operations and driving that sustainable performance. You know, what would you be telling farmers? What would you, as a take-home message?
Well, I'd be more or less trying to say to them is don't chop and change. And that's, if you have a system that works, you'd often see people that use a nut this year and a milk replacer this year, and they've been using it for 5 years and getting on great, and all of a sudden the chop and change from their system. If you have your system, your measuring system, your protocol set up, and you know what works, stick to it. But after that, I would say to you, measure. You do need to measure. There's no point in trying to guess what weight they are. the likes of a weigh band or weighing scales, you have to know where you are. If you're on 100 kilos when they're weaned, that's where you need to be. You don't want to be at 90 kilos and have them weaned.
And as the old saying goes, you can't manage what you don't measure. Alan, key take-home tips. What would you be telling farmers? What would you like to, as some of the key take-home messages?
I suppose again, look, it's similar to Liam. It's stick to the system. But what I'm talking about is keeping the numbers level. Keep, if you bought 100 calves last year, try and buy 100 this year. What we do see at times, we've seen it very much so in the last 2 years. I think the beef price rise and the following on calf price rise spooked some people last year. People thought it wouldn't last and it'd be a blip, and they cut numbers and changed out of the sucklers or changed into this and that. And I think people got a bit confused as to where they were going with their farms. And it was an expensive lesson for some people because they didn't buy back in at the right time, and they missed out on I suppose, cashed in too low and bought back in too high, and things like that happened, So I would say, look, stick to the system, keep doing what you're doing. I'm not too worried about breeds. I say, look, whatever you buy, but just to buy the best within the breed you can, and don't pay excessively if at all possible, and try and maintain the level of output on your farm that you normally have.
Margaret, key messages here for farmers in the business of rearing calves. What would you be telling them to take home as your key message?
Key message from us would be, while the beef price is high and long may that last, we saw there from the main board that the top third of performers were tripled their profits, but that necessarily wasn't the case for the bottom third. So it's not all about the beef price. The beef price isn't going to fix everything. So you need to have efficiency in your animals. So look at your CBV. If you have your own animals, check out your CBV. If you're buying any animals, ask for the CBV. Farm to farm will have it if the farm you're buying from has it, or through the marts. There's a lot of profit to be gained there. So while again, another board there from the Dairy Beef Village was Clean Ryan and David Kelly. They showed a 3:1 return on paying for the top quality genetics. So yeah, those calves were €55 dearer, but they got it back on the efficiency. So look, it's a top question we get the whole time. While the calf prices are high, if you are buying a deer calf, make sure it's the right calf.
So I suppose, yeah, so, when we look at any good systems, it is a balance between that genetics piece that you're talking about, Margaret, and the nutrition piece that Alan and obviously Liam are talking about as well. Charles, I suppose key take-home messages, on from your perspective, the Certified Irish Angus perspective.
Yeah, so for me today was very, very informative. The first thing I'd say is go home. This is a good business. It's a profitable business. We've had so much negativity down through the years about the results from it, but today, for me, displayed very much that this is a profitable business. Never have we had the tools at our disposal, from automatic feeders to the data from ICBF for the information that we can get from CBV values. So we've never had that sort of ability, the grassland management, all of that. Use all of that, all of those tools to make your farm profitable and successful. Obviously, I'd like everyone to use Angus, but that's as the lads said here, that's not an option for everybody. So I do think that the breed is not really the most important thing. But and going back to something that Paul said on the stand, and you mentioned it, have your farm profitable, have it manageable, and have it. I can't remember what the last thing he said was. Attractive. Yeah, and I think it is very important that it be attractive to young people who are coming into the business. Obviously, we have a program for young people to encourage them, and I think there's a fantastic amount of young people even here today. We hear about the dairy days where you have a lot of young people. For me, walking around here today, there were loads of young people, loads of enthusiastic young people, and to help them and encourage them to use these tools, and knowing that the result will be a good one at the end of the day. So
there is a great positive message coming out of here as regards Irish dairy calf to beef production. Alan, we've seen it there, that there is scope there to generate margins. There are challenges, there are headwinds there, but nothing that the industry isn't unable to overcome. And just I see there Tennis and Egar there from Irish Hereford Prime as well. It's a big year for the Herefords in Ireland as well, I believe, having their European conference later on this year as well. I said I give that a mention as well. But Amie, final comments there as well. We have a positive message coming out of here. Are you positive for the future of farming? What's your key take-home message for you as a farmer that you'd give maybe other farmers here today?
Yeah, I think it's probably been said already, is just control what you can control inside your own farm gate. We're all different. The big one for me is probably the genetics, is chat to your dairy farmer. It's probably gone a bit late in the breeding season now, but like breeding though, using those better quality bulls, it's free. There's not too much free in Ireland in farming, and if you can get them better quality bulls and increase your profitability at no cost to you, I think it's a win-win scenario.
Yeah. So maybe don't be coming home out of here saying, oh, it's the Terrier, that's the good mead land, that's what they can do. There's plenty every farmer can do, good land, bad land, at home, within their own farm gate, on their own land type, to make their systems better and maybe make their farms, like you said, Charles and Paul said earlier, make it a more attractive place to work and a better place to work overall. So look, folks, that's about just all we have time for today. I'd like to thank my 5 panellists: Liam Gannon from Feed for Growth, Alan Dillon from Teagasc, Margaret Kelleher from ICBF, Charles Smith from Certified Irish Angus, and Amie Coonan, beef farmer from County Tipperary. So maybe we'll have a round of applause for our panellists, and thank you very much for tuning in, everybody.